Hello, and welcome to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is another episode of my Innocence Lost series. So every week, I select someone who is either incarcerated or has been exonerated for a crime that they did not commit. And we talk a little bit about the crimes, what happened in regards to why they were looked at wrongful, why they were the suspects, if there was even a reason or what led to their wrongful conviction. So we look at these, kind of to learn and to see where things may have gone wrong in our justice system. So today's episode, I'm excited to bring this one to you because with the recent Karen Reed trial that happened and the mistrial and everything that was going on, a lot of people compared the Karen Reed trial to this particular case, which is also in Massachusetts. So it's the Commonwealth versus Sean Ellis, and he was tried 3 times for a crime he didn't commit. He was almost tried a 4th time until he was finally exonerated. And we're going to get into it. We're going to read through some of his story and read some of his commentary that he's made. He's very outspoken. He's very intelligent. He's very outspoken now as a advocate for reform for the justice system. So I love what he's doing now and the things that he has been trying to make happen in the justice system. He's asking for change, for reform, because it's desperately, desperately needed. So you might know of this case because it was on Netflix. There's an 8-part series on Netflix. I'm not going to do an 8-part series here. I'm going to just give you some of the highlights, talk about the evidence, talk a little bit about Sean, and kind of go from there. So let's begin. I am on the justiceforseanellis.com page, and I'm going to be reading through some of these points of his case. Something that he has said, which is a famous quote, and he has also written an article about this, which we will read. It is called "Wounded but Not Broken." I may be wounded, but I'm not broken. Sean K. Ellis, advocate for criminal justice reform. Sean K. Ellis. Sean K. Ellis was convicted in 1995. Some of you watching probably weren't even born then. And I was younger. I was in my younger years at that time. Probably not much younger than Sean at this time. All right, so Sean K. Ellis was convicted in 1995 at his 3rd trial. So the first 2 trials ended in a mistrial. And if you're interested in why mistrials and why can people get tried again if a jury didn't find them guilty in the first place, we're going to be talking about that in my next episode of the Canton Cover-Up. Episode, I think it's 52 or 53. We're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be going over a paper a legal paper regarding changing that possibility to get retried for something you weren't found guilty of. Because a mistrial just means it's a win for the defense, because it means that the Commonwealth or the state, whoever is pursuing the charges, they lost. They didn't prove their case. So it is a loss. It is definitely a loss for them. Anyways. So what happens after mistrials? We're going to talk about that in the next episode. So make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss that. And also, please hit the like button in this episode because it'll help push it out to more individuals that can get this information. All right. So he was put on trial at his 3rd trial. He was convicted for the 1993 robbery and homicide of a Boston police detective, John J. Mulligan. Sean's first 2 trials ended in hung juries, which is exactly what happened in the Karen Reed case. Her first trial, ended in a hung jury. All right, so sentenced to life in prison, Sean always proclaimed his innocence. He spent 21 years, 7 months, and 29 days behind bars until May 2015, when Suffolk Superior Court Judge Carol Ball overturned his convictions, ruling that due to police corruption and prosecutors' misconduct in his trial, justice was not done. That's a pretty big deal to have a judge overturn convictions. So Judge Ball granted him bail to await a new fair trial, and on June 6th, 2015, Sean was released from prison, but not a free man, technically, yet. Charges were still looming over his head because the Commonwealth had intended to try him for a fourth time, even though the first 3 times didn't stick. So accordingly, the court concluded that this is a case where justice was not done. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts set the date for Sean's 4th trial for the homicide of Detective John Mulligan. Sean's defense attorneys, Rosemary Scapicchio and Jaleese McDonough, who are in the documentary, they went to work determined to prove his innocence. Then abruptly, on December 2018, Suffolk County's acting district attorney held a press conference to announce he was dropping the robbery and homicide charges against Sean. In 2021, Sean's 1995 weapons possession conviction was overturned by Judge Robert Ullman, and in a final flourish in 2021, the City of Boston awarded Sean $16 million atonement for misconduct by Boston police. Not only was it Boston police, but also the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the way that they went about prosecuting him, which is why I titled my episode whatever I titled it. Netflix's Trial 4, A Story of Malicious Prosecution, because not only was there a ton of corruption going on regarding the law enforcement, the Commonwealth was complicit in covering up the corruption and the crap that was going on with the very officer that was found to have lost his life. He ended up being corrupt as well. So that leaves a plethora of individuals who might have wanted him to no longer be breathing. All right, so Netflix's Trial 4 came out in November 2020, an original 8-part documentary series about Sean Ellis. And I do recommend it. It is very good. It goes through the whole process. So that's a little bit about Sean. Let's look at Sean's early life. Sean Ellis was born in Boston in July 1974 to Mary Jackie Ellis and her husband, John Ellis. The couple later divorced, and Jackie moved from Boston's Dorchester section to a housing project across town in Roslindale. And I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing these like a Bostonian. I'm from Chicago, and I talk like a Chicagoan. But I love the Boston accent, and I wish I could talk like that. All right, so the couple later divorced, and she moved to a housing project in Roslindale. Wanting a better education for her children than was available in her neighborhood, she enrolled Sean and 2 other of her children in METCO, the voluntary school integration program run by the Metropolitan Council for Educational Opportunity that buses selected Boston students to high-performing suburban schools. So this smart lady, Mary Ellis, found this opportunity, and she's like, well, I'm sending my kids to the best school there is in their area, where there's opportunity for them. And they went to a high-performing suburban school. The benefits flow both ways. For the primarily white outlying schools, benefit from the injection of diversity. Sean, his sister Janelle, and their brother Joseph Moody were all enrolled in the Needham, Massachusetts schools, and there is a really cute picture of Sean. Look at his cute little mug there. back in whatever grade this is, 1983. And I just want to say, I'm digging this girl's outfit. I know I had an outfit very similar to this and probably wore my hair like the same way. I mean, that's not me, but it could have been. It looks like pictures I have of myself when I was probably about that age. All right, so Sean Ellis in third grade. This is his third grade picture. Um, Typically, just one or two African American students were placed in each suburban classroom through the METCO program. So that's pretty awesome, giving them the opportunity for a better education. This section's really sad. So, mourning his brother in 1984, Sean's brother Joseph, a popular and witty student at Needham's Pollard Middle School, tragically drowned at a classmate's pool party one hot June day. He hadn't told anybody that he couldn't swim. This is terrifying and sad. And everybody, make sure your kids know how to swim, or at least tell them if you don't know how to swim, stay out of the water. All right, so after Joseph's loss of life, Sean would ride his bike over to his brother's grave and sit on the grass all afternoon, gazing into the distance. He eventually asked to leave the Needham schools. By that time, his mother had moved back to Dorchester, and Sean transferred to Dorchester High School, where he played football and was interested in computers. He graduated in 1992. He's a few years older than me. All right, so Hansborough boy. During the early 90s, Sean's mother's corner of Dorchester was a hotbed of street violence. As a teenager, Sean cast his lot with a group of friends who hung on Hansborough Street. Termed a posse by police, the boys were nonetheless devoted friends who provided each other security and support, often in lieu of families. When streets became battlefields, they watched each other's backs and, in being together, felt safe. A band of brothers, so to speak. Was Sean looking for brothers? Looking back, he believes he was. After graduating high school, Sean looked unsuccessfully for jobs. Quote, I sent out job applications but got no replies, he recalls. By his own admission, he had a few, quote, run-ins with the law as a teen, most stemming from domestic disturbances. There was discord at home, fueled by drug use. Sean greatly disliked his mother's live-in boyfriend. Disputes arose, and his mother, Mary Jackie Ellis, called the cops a couple of times to teach Sean a lesson. And, with the loss of a sibling or a son, I'm sure there was a lot of undealt with emotions in that home that might have been dealt with in other ways, not healthy ways, I'll say. All right, so in one such incident, Sean took his 2-year-old sister for a walk around the block to escape a noisy argument and soothe her crying. Suddenly felt a policeman's tap on his shoulder, and Sean was arrested for kidnapping. The charge was later dropped. That's ridiculous. Why would you call? That's crazy. All right, looking back on the dangerous city streets he negotiated daily as a teen, Sean Ellis had said more than once, if I'd not been in prison, I definitely could have been had his life ended. All right, so that's his early life. Let's go on to a little bit about his incarceration. So in 1993, Sean was considering entering a mechanics program at the urging of his cousin Tracy Brown, who was whose life was taken 3 days after Mulligan. That's awful. He probably didn't even get a chance to mourn his cousin. All right, so then came John Mulligan's homicide and Sean's arrest. He spent his last free day on October 5th, 1993. Despite negative press commentary about Sean in the wake of his arrest, former Boston Globe columnist Mike Barnicle, citing no specifics, called him, quote, a one-man crime wave. Sean had never been charged with street violence and had never been convicted of a crime. Quote, it was small stuff in Dorchester District Court that was going to be dismissed, Boston Globe reporter John Element told author Elaine Murphy in a phone interview. Well, this is a picture of crooked detectives, Kenneth Acera and Walter Robinson, bringing him in for charges. All right, so the conviction, there are details of the Commonwealth's case against Sean on this website, and we will get into a little bit of it. We're not going to go through all of it, but if you guys want more, then I recommend you let me know, and I can do a little bit more on the Sean Ellis case. So, in prison, in his near 22 years of incarceration, Ellis was a model prisoner rising in status through the Massachusetts correctional system and earning certification as a paralegal via a correspondence course. He's a paralegal now. Like, he taught himself how to become a paralegal in prison. And he doesn't quit. Like, he's been very much a self advocate while he was in prison. At medium security MCI Norfolk, he was one of the select groups of inmates trained to counsel at-risk youth. Sean Ellis is quoting from prison, writing from a Norfolk prison in 2013. He's quoted as saying, quote, rather than succumb to the negative pressures of this penal setting, I continuously work to prove my innocence and to do better. To better myself, end quote. Here is a letter from prison that he wrote, which I think is interesting. So in fall 2013, Sean Ellis sent letters to the Urban League, the NAACP, American Civil Liberties Union, and a dozen other social injustice and legal organizations, asking their help in bringing attention and a voice to rectify his wrongful conviction. And here's his letter. So this is when he was still currently incarcerated. My name is Sean K. Ellis. I am currently incarcerated at MCI Norfolk, serving a natural life sentence for a crime I did not commit. Since my arrest, I have dedicated myself to proving my innocence. My attorney and my family have been instrumental in this endeavor. For the last 10 years, he was working with the same attorney for 10 years. This is how hard it is to get a conviction overturned. He was in prison for 22. So the first 12, he was advocating for himself, or he had other lawyers that just weren't getting the job done or sticking with it. But for the last 20 years of his imprisonment, his attorney, Rosemary Scapaccio, has not only been my representative, she has been integral in uncovering the hidden truths about the elements of my case and who may have taken the life of victim Detective John J. Mulligan. I did not do it. I am a 39-year-old native of Boston, Massachusetts. I was schooled in the Needham Public School System until transferring to Dorchester High, where I eventually graduated. I am the father of a beautiful young lady named Tatiana. Unfortunately, I lost my father in December, and my mother is getting older seemingly fast. And that happens a lot when a family member is wrongfully in prison. You can see the way that the family members look, and it takes a toll on them, and it's stress, puts you in a constantly stressful state, and oftentimes it can lead to serious health conditions. All right, so while growing up, I had a few run-ins with the law. However, this is my first and only incarceration. Since being incarcerated, I have invested in my growth and development as a human being by participating in many diverse programs such as Intro to Spectrum, Men's Work, Health Awareness, 4 Phases of Alternatives to Violence Project, Success in Leadership and Communication in Speechcraft, Post-Grad Math Skills, Jericho Circle, and Jericho Circle Intensive, where I continue to be a facilitator/circle guide. I don't know what any of those are, but they're some sort of organizations for his own growth and development. So these might be classes that that was available to him, or opportunities that have become available to him throughout his time in prison. I'm on the board of directors of Second Thoughts, Inc., an inmate-run program at MCI Norfolk, and I am also an active member who takes part in counseling troubled youth. So this guy is a good guy. I mean, by all intents and purposes, from what we're seeing, he seems to have his act together. He seems to be like the model inmate. Furthermore, except for the fact that he won't admit that he did it, obviously, everyone wants their inmates to admit guilt because everyone in prison's guilty. Sorry, just a little snark. All right, so furthermore, I am one of 5 elected men who comprise the executive board of the Norfolk Inmate Council. As a member of the executive board, my function is to meet with the superintendent and his administration to find viable solutions to the to the problems and issues that plague the population and facility. So this dude is an executive board member he's an inmate, but he's like the executive board member of the Norfolk Inmate Council. Cool. Lastly, I have obtained my paralegal diploma from the Blackstone Career Institute. Rather than succumb to the negative pressures of this penal setting, I continuously work to prove my innocence and to better myself. I don't know why I keep getting that wrong. I only mention these accomplishments as a testament of who I am as a person. I am the victim of a gross injustice. The Boston Police Department has chosen to deny public records requests in favor of covering up the real evidence in my case and concealing the unscrupulous activities of rogue, dirty cops who manufactured the evidence against me. And that, my friends, is the biggest problem we have, probably, in law enforcement or in the justice system, is that these rogue cops can just manufacture evidence and put anybody away. That's a lot of power to have. And that's a lot of pressure to get it right and to make sure you're getting it right and to not be a dirty cop. Detectives investigating my case, Kenneth Acera and Walter Robinson, have pled guilty to public corruption charges in federal court. A third detective, John Brazel, avoided prosecution by cooperating with federal authorities. So he ratted on everybody. All 3 of these detectives were responsible for producing the only evidence presented against me at trial. So these investigators, these dirty cops, their investigation is what put him behind bars. It's the only evidence that put him behind bars. So therefore, he deserves either a new trial or the charges to be thrown out because the evidence is tainted. The integrity of this investigation was compromised from the very start with the involvement of Detective John Brazel and his involving both detectives Acera and Robinson, 2 non-homicide detectives. In fact, ironically, it was Detective Acera's niece that identified my photograph from a photo array. Very interesting indeed. Only after speaking privately with him and Detective Robinson. So Acera's niece is the one that IDs him, and she was spoken to privately by Detective Robinson. This happened on the heels of selecting 2 photographs of different people. Attorney Scapicchio has tirelessly worked to uncover other substantial evidence that further highlights this injustice. Her work has culminated into a filing. Sorry, my dog keeps making a bunch of noises. Her work has culminated into the filing of a motion for new trial with an argument of actual innocence being presented. Aside from the new trial motion, Attorney Scapicchio has filed a civil lawsuit against the Boston Police Department and the City of Boston, seeking the production of documents/evidence relevant to proving my innocence. And this is a big problem as to the whole misconduct, the prosecutorial misconduct, and dragging this out and not giving them discovery and turning over, so they were still getting discovery up until this fourth trial. It's a discovery that they should have had back in 1995 for the first trial. So tell me why that is. The Commonwealth has been withholding evidence that might exculpate this individual and potentially inculpate other people, like other officers that might have done something to Mulligan, or any one of his like informants, or one of the hookers that he would bring over and have them come perform in his car for him, and things like that. So, yeah, all of that was not brought out in discovery for Sean Ellis's first case. Not until Scapaccio, his attorney, came out and really dug into the evidence and looked at it. So apart from the civil lawsuit, I still need your help in bringing attention and a voice to this injustice. I believe that my attorney, my family, and I would benefit from having your support. Will you stand with us? Please do not sit quietly when your voice can help free an innocent man. You can help my attorney if you have any questions about my case and or if you're interested in learning what to do. Respectfully, Sean Ellis. And now we're going to read. Let's flip over here. So this is the Wounded but Not Broken by Sean Ellis. It's kind of like a question and answer. So this was um, it's a photo for the Boston Globe, but I don't know where this article necessarily was posted, if there's an original. Okay, so it's on the New England Innocence.org webpage. I clicked on here too, so don't click on the Wounded but Not Broken because you can't buy those shirts anymore. Just an FYI, I looked. But, um, anyways, so let me make this a little bit bigger. It's very hard to read now. All right, so my name is Sean Ellis, and I was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for nearly 22 years for a crime I did not commit. I've been through a horrendous ordeal, and as a result, I have been deeply hurt. I have been vilified in the public eye. I have suffered injuries. I have suffered pain, and I have suffered tremendous loss. This is, I mean, that first line is or these first few lines are beautiful, and people need to understand when anyone is convicted or accused, when anyone is accused of a crime, and it even goes to the level of, possibly a trial, or, it breaks the news, it becomes a media sensation, you are forever looked upon as a potential unaliver. And you can never get your life back. So these prosecutors who have the power to move forward with or dismiss cases really need to take that power seriously, because I'm going to read that line again. I've been through a horrendous ordeal, and as a result, I have been deeply hurt. I have been vilified in the public eye. I have suffered injuries. I have suffered pain, and I have suffered tremendous loss. However, despite this grave injustice, I refuse to be broken. I am unwilling to allow these trials and tribulations to define who I am or put me in a space of inertia or defeatism. This concept of being wounded but not broken isn't isolated to those who have suffered at the hands of the criminal legal system. It encompasses those who have endured whatever hardships that life has thrown at them and have pushed back against it, refusing to let it crush them and sought a path toward healing. That's beautiful. All right, so how does it feel to still be fighting for some semblance of justice after nearly 30 years? As I await the court's ruling in my motion to overturn my wrongful conviction, so at this point he wasn't out yet. I am, or he wasn't free yet. He might have been out, but he on bail, but he wasn't free. I am reliving everything I've experienced while fighting this case for more than 28 years, and that is incredibly, tremendously stressful. And it's got to take a toll on you physically and mentally, emotionally, all of it. During that time, I lost so much. My dad died. My firstborn nephew died. My next door neighbor died. Two very close aunts, both of whom I grew up with, died. My best friend died, and my mother was diagnosed with cancer. They all lived in Massachusetts, but I wasn't allowed to attend their funerals. The Department of Corrections didn't allow it because of the life without parole sentence that I was serving. This not only speaks to the inhumaneness of such a sentence, but it also speaks to the trauma and harm I've endured at the hands of the Boston Police Department and the criminal legal system. When I think about the impact this wrongful conviction has had on my life, I can't help but think about some of these things, along with the fact that while my mom continues to live, she has more years behind her than she has in front of her. While my loved ones are happy to have me home, I can't help but think about the detrimental psychological effects of incarceration, which have negatively impacted the quality of the relationships that I have with my siblings. You probably feel like you don't know them coming out of prison after 20 something years, and you're like, I know we grew up together, but I don't know anything about you anymore. I am able to keep fighting because though I am wounded by all of those losses, I remain unbroken. What would it mean to be fully exonerated of all your wrongful convictions? I know all too well that the Commonwealth is not usually in the business of pursuing justice, nor are they in the business of exonerating people. They are in the business of obtaining and sustaining convictions at all costs. I'm going to repeat that. Your DA's offices, your institutions pursuing charges on people, they are in the business of obtaining and sustaining convictions at all costs. That includes law enforcement. That includes the attorneys, usually, on the state side, the prosecutor, and sometimes even the judge. As we've seen in the Karen Reed case, I absolutely feel that Judge Bev is corrupt. All right, so if this was not their standard of operating, a standard procedure of operating, I would have never spent a day in prison for a crime I did not commit. I would have been released in 1998 when the information my attorneys and I were seeking, but the former DA's office withheld, resulted in the arrest of the low-level players in the corruption scheme. I would have been released when it was learned that in 1994, a year after the homicide of Detective Mulligan, there was a simultaneous investigation underway into the conduct of the detectives on my case, Detectives Sarah, Robinson, and Brassel. I would have been released once it became known that Detectives Mulligan, Sarah, Robinson, and Brassel, along with their supervisor, were present and participated in the kidnapping and robbery of local drug dealers just days before Detective Mulligan's homicide. So the four of them, these four corrupt cops, were stealing from drug dealers. How do you think that's going to go? Former police commissioner knew the victim was involved in corruption and still placed this cadre of dirty cops amongst who he called the best and the brightest. Remember these names, Sarah, Robinson, and Brazil. They infected every aspect of the Commonwealth's case against me from the homicide to the armed robbery and right down to my remaining firearm charges. They cannot be parsed apart. So the firearm charges, I believe, are because they say he was in possession of the firearms, or his girlfriend was, of the firearms that he took from, or the weapon that he used, and Detective Mulligan's firearm. That's what they're saying, what they found. But I think it was planted, or I don't know, maybe not even, because if you think about the taillight pieces in the Karen Reed case and the undocumented searches that Trooper Proctor did, and how taillight pieces just kept revealing themselves over days and days after the crime scene had already been released to the public, because it was never really secured in the first place. So all those taillight pieces that Proctor says he could have found, he could have just put them in a bag and said, "Oh yeah, I found them here," but didn't even go to 34 Fairview. You know what I'm saying? Like he could have just said, "Oh yeah, these were found on 34 Fairview on this day," and literally he just grabbed them from inside his desk, threw them in the envelope, and said, "Here's evidence." You know what I mean? Ooh, sorry, that was loud. That straw in there, it's like if you have it slanted in the very slightest, it makes a weird noise. I think it's air in there. All right, so um so those are the charges. So he was charged with the homicide of Detective Mulligan. He was charged with armed robbery because he took Mulligan's um supposedly took Mulligan's gun, and then the firearm charges, illegal possession of a firearm. So they were still trying to hold on to like that last remaining charge until they couldn't anymore. So when I think about a full exoneration, I first have to divorce myself from the reality of what I know and have experienced personally. What I can and will say is that for someone to exonerate Sean K. Ellis, the person making that decision has to be of such extraordinary character that they are willing to go against the status quo in order to do what is right and what is just. And that is a big problem in our justice system as well, because everybody just wants to go with the flow, just go with the status quo. If a judge ruled on this in the past as a no, then I rule no. Well, what's then why are you here, judge? If all you're going to do is rule a certain way that another judge rules, then why are you here? Aren't you supposed to be impartial and look at the evidence and tell us what's just and what's right, not let's just go with what that past judge said. It's maddening. I say extraordinary character because racism and biases exist within the criminal legal system. Both racism and biases exist within the office of the district attorney. Judge Ball exonerated me when she said that justice was not done, and the Supreme Judicial Court exonerated me when they affirmed Judge Ball's decision and referred to the revelations of the withheld evidence, specifically the involvement of Detective Mulligan in the corruption, as a game changer. I am grateful D.A. Rollins brought the fortitude and integrity of her life experiences with her to the office when deciding to assent to my motion for new trial. I hope that the court will agree and allow the DA's office to drop the charges as they have committed to do, so I can move on with my life. So back at this time, DA Rollins was probably very new. She was elected into office. The DA is an elected position, and so she was elected while Sean was potentially awaiting to go to his fourth trial, which ended up not happening. So the fourth trial was this other DA who had been there for ages and didn't want to give Sean or hear from Sean's attorney anything other than that the Commonwealth was right. So they didn't want to hear any kind of um, conflicting beliefs or facts or evidence that went against what the Commonwealth stated had happened. So the former DA didn't want anything to do with it. He resigned after the election, and he didn't run again, by the way. So he actually just left office, but he resigned 3 months prior to when his term ended. So another DA came in the interim, and he's the one that dismissed the charges, which politically speaking, we think it's because DA Rollins couldn't really, well, she would have done it anyways because she's the first woman and first person of color to be a DA in this district. So, her using her own life experiences and bringing that to the table, she can maybe look at things a little bit differently than the former acting DA. So that was the thing. So they knew that DA Rollins would be coming in and probably looking very closely at the case. So that's why I think the interim DA said, you know what, we're going to drop the charges, even though they said Sean Ellis is absolutely guilty and he did this without a doubt, but we're dropping the charges because we just can't do the investigation, blah, blah, blah. That's the excuse they gave. Which, when have you ever heard the Commonwealth say, or the state, whoever is in power, say, well, we're just not going to do it just because we don't have the time is against us or whatever because it's so far out. But I don't think that is a great reason. I think if they really wanted to retry him, they would have. I think it was because of they didn't want DA Rollins looking too closely at all the corruption and maybe finding more things that weren't found. That's what I think personally, but I could be totally wrong. All right, so why is public acknowledgement of mistakes or injustice so important for people who have been wrongfully convicted? Public acknowledgement is so important to the exoneree, depending on who you ask, because, as it was in my case, I was vilified in the public eye. I was vilified to a group of 16 people, 12 of whom decided my fate. That group of 12 people were given a false narrative, and as a result, they wrongfully convicted me. I was sentenced to spend the remainder of my life in prison based on this false narrative. A public acknowledgement of mistakes and wrongdoing is equally as important, if not more important, for the proponent of the false narrative because it is an opportunity for them to take a step towards justice and say, wait, I am not okay with this, and I'm not going along with the wrong that was done to this individual. And it can prevent other wrongful convictions. It helps right that wrong by, you have to address it. I think people who spend time in prison, any amount of time in prison, they need to be reimbursed somehow financially because you've taken away their rights. It's ridiculous, the power that these prosecutors have. Public acknowledgement of injustice, in my case, is also vitally important because there has been an admission of wrongdoing on the part of the Boston Police Department. Therefore, there should be an investigation, not just into my wrongful conviction, but all convictions involving the Boston Police Department obtained during the years these corrupt officers were on the force. And that's the thing. They don't go back and do this. Look at Trooper Proctor in Karen Reed, and they're probably not going to go back and look at all of his cases, and they absolutely should look at least do like a random search of, a random kind of audit of his cases and see if there was any kind of corruption or anything going on, or if he was looking for nudes from other people that he had suspected of crimes. Those are the things that we need to hold these people accountable for. And okay, right now, Trooper Proctor has been suspended without pay, which I think it's just the process because of the union, and eventually he's going to be let go. But that's not it. There's so much more involved. The Sergeant Buchanan and Lieutenant Tully, who oversaw him and were in these text conversations where Proctor was being completely inappropriate and crossing a line over whatever oath you take as an officer to the law, to the people. He didn't fulfill that. He broke that. But so did so many others, and they need to be held accountable for those things too. And that's what I'm hoping to see start happening, but it looks like Massachusetts is really messed up. This is Suffolk County, and Karen Reed's in Norfolk County. I don't know. I just know they're different counties. I don't really know the difference or where anybody's located because, again, I'm not from there. But as you can see, it is more systemic than just Karen Reed's case. It's been going on for years. These things have been going on in police departments everywhere for years. We're just now learning about it, talking about it. People are fed up about it. So we need to talk about it. And that's why public acknowledgement is so important. All right, I'll get off my bandwagon. Sorry. All right, therefore, there should be an investigation, not just into my wrongful conviction, but all the convictions involving the Boston PD during those years. As a community, it is our responsibility to fight to ensure that police departments in particular and DA's offices are operating with transparency and accountability. Despite how formidable they are, you have the right and the capacity to fight injustices perpetuated by these departments, and we all stand with you in that fight. And that's where I'm going to leave you guys. I think that, well, I have a video I'm going to play of Sean Ellis talking about being a phoenix and coming back up from the ashes. So I'm going to leave you with his, with a brief, because he's a motivational speaker. He goes to colleges. I found a bunch of stuff online where he speaks at colleges. He speaks at, like legal, uh, conferences and things like that. So he speaks about reform and what happened to him as an individual and the fight that he has had to suffer, him and his family, for over 20 something years. So I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to leave you with this last video here. And I'm going to disappear and full screen it. Where's the full screen? There we go. All right. So I'm going to get quiet. And this is Sean Ellis. I felt like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
Growing up, I was a tall, lanky fellow with huge feet. I had yet to grow into my sneaker size. I was a child that had low self-esteem, and I didn't think I was smart. I was in some remedial classes. I didn't even think I was handsome. Growing up, I even had a kid that was my friend make fun of me because I had a really bad speech problem. He said that when I talked, I sounded like a dirt bike because when I stuttered, it was like, wah, 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 wah. It was a bad stutter. It was years later that this tall, lanky kid with a bad speech problem would find himself arrested and falsely accused of a horrific murder. My years in prison were the worst years of my life. I remember being fearful that I would grow old in prison. I remember fearing that I would lose contact with my family as the generations got older. I feared my mom dying when I was in prison, and I feared dying in prison myself. It was this time in prison that I remember seeing this image of a bird seemingly rising out of ashes. And this bird was a bird that I'd never seen before, and the ashes represented my life. It represented my life because I had to destroy myself. I had to break myself down as a human. And what I mean by that is I had to detach the things that allowed me to feel, that allowed me to connect. I had to detach those things. I would eventually part ways with my attorneys. And this was done in the face of extraordinary fear and extreme anxiety, because there was a fight that was going on for my life. And I was the only one that wasn't in the fight. I didn't know how to fight. But I befriended a guy in prison that was very good with the law, and he was a good guy, and I asked him would he help me, and of course, he helped everybody. And 2 months into him saying that he would help me, I remember being on a wreck in a unit and standing at his door talking to him because I wanted to know the progress that he was making on my case. And like I said, it was during my wreck, so everybody was out of their cells, either making phone calls or taking showers or playing cards or dominoes. So my back was to the wall, and I was talking to him through the crack of the crack of a door. And so, I wanted to know what was going on, so I asked him. I said, what's good with my case? Did you see anything? It's like, let me know what your thoughts are. And the more he talked, the more frustrated I became. He wasn't saying anything that I was willing to hear, anything that I wanted to hear. And as he began to hear the frustration in my voice, he said to me, they call me Sai. He said, Sai, you gotta learn this shit. He said, what are you gonna do if I die tomorrow? And he had a bad heart, so I understood that he wasn't just being mean. But I was livid. I didn't want to hear that. I needed help. I couldn't do it by myself. I didn't know how to do it myself. I didn't even believe in myself. But at that time, I got my paperwork back from him. Kind of my shoulders hung over, and I made my way back to the cell. And in the cell, I had to sift through the anger that I felt, the hate that I felt, the hurt that I felt, and under all that was fear. I was scared because I couldn't fight. I didn't know how to fight for my life. But I knew that this wasn't the time for my low self-esteem, my lack of confidence, my not believing in myself. So I turned my cell into my own little makeshift law office. I mean, there was papers everywhere, papers on the wall, papers on the floor. And I folded back my little 2-inch mattress. And there was papers on that and on a metal slab that laid on. See, years prior, I began to work on myself, and there was some self-development. And it was in that cell, it was cell 60 of Unit N1, that things began to come together. And I knew that I had to sift through my fears, my self-doubt, to come to a place where I can construct some legal arguments. See, when I spoke about the ashes of the phoenix, it was because I was in hell, burning, and I was innocent. So as I constructed the arguments, I ended up sending them out to an attorney by the name of Rosemary Scarpicio, and she wrote back. And when I see my name on a legal mail list, I got really excited, but I got fearful as well. I was a ball of emotions, but because I had to detach all of that, I told myself, hold on, wait. I had to prepare myself in the event that she told me no, she couldn't take my case. And I also had to prepare myself for not becoming overjoyed if she said that she would. She told me that she was interested, but I had to wait for 3 months for her to clear my desk, to clear her desk. And the question for me was, could I be patient? But this represented hope for me. When I didn't have any hope, I just knew I didn't want to die in prison for a crime I didn't commit. But as I was reading that letter, I had the biggest smile on my face. I just didn't know that patience would mean that I would spend an additional 12 to 15 years sitting in prison as we fought. It was 22 years in total that I spent in prison. But I remember on that day, that I walked out of that courthouse with my mom's hand clenched in my hand, I felt like that phoenix. But this time it was the bird that was rising from the ashes. And to you, I say, still we rise. Thank you.
If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeincourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.